Hey there, if you're the parent of a toddler or preschooler who's really struggling at daycare and at school, but you're not seeing the same things at home, then you're going to want to stay tuned. In this video, I'm going to talk about the top reasons why kids are struggling in other environments outside the home and what you can do as a parent to help support your child, as well as your teacher or care provider in that situation. Hey there, my name is Jill Urbane, also known as the Mentor Mom, and I help parents navigate the ups and downs of the early childhood years by providing parenting tips, strategy, and information on early childhood development. Okay, let's get to it. I'd like to preface this video by giving a shout out to all of those care providers and early childhood educators, because it is not an easy job taking care of multiple kids with all of those different personalities and temperaments. So I want you all to know that I really appreciate what you're doing and understand the complexity of it. And what I'm hoping here is, if you're a parent, to be able to provide you with some insights that maybe you can share with your care provider or educator, or if you happen to be a care provider or educator, to give you some sense of what's going on possibly with the little one that might be struggling in your care, as well as tips and strategies for both parents and caretakers and educators when we have little ones who are really, really struggling in those environments. The first thing we need to look at is, where are these behaviors happening? And by that I mean, are they happening in multiple environments? Like, it doesn't matter whether we're going shopping or at grandma's house or at school. Everywhere we go, the little one is struggling with these different behaviors. Or are these behaviors more specific to certain situations and environments? Because that can help us to really hone in on what is going on there. For example, I had a parent the other day who was sharing that their little one struggles at home. And I do want to say that it is common that our little ones are going to struggle more at home and do more testing at home and things like that, because we're the safest people for them to do that. No matter what they do, we're not going to stop loving them. We may not like being around them in those moments, but we're not going to stop loving them. So it's natural that we're going to see some challenging behaviors from our kids at home. The problem is if we're doing strategies and we're being consistent and we're not seeing any changes in those behaviors, then we might want to seek out some outside help. But getting back to my example, she was sharing that the little one struggled a lot with one set of grandparents, but while they were with the other set of grandparents, everything was fine and they were perfect little angels. That says a lot right there. And I'm going to talk more about what I think was going on there in a moment. So start with, is it happening everywhere, or is it only happening in like one or two specific environments outside the home? That will make it easier for us to identify what the potential root cause of that is. But before I go on and talk a little bit more about like what's driving these behaviors, we have to do a quick little Brain 101. Let's start with a really simplified overview of the brain, and you can find more exhaustive information on this and how it impacts behavior in my video, Meltdowns and Tantrums, which I will link down below. So let's just break the brain down into three parts. The first part is our primitive brain. Our primitive brain oversees breathing and heartbeats. It also plays a crucial role in the fight or flight response. And this automatic reaction helps the body respond to perceived threats by preparing to either confront the danger or escape from it. The next level is the emotional part of the brain, and that is where our preschoolers and toddlers are living. The emotional part of the brain, or the limbic brain, influences the emotional aspects of the fight or flight response. And then finally, we have the analytical part of the brain, the problem solving, the executive thinking skills. But one thing that we have to be aware of with young children is they don't really get to that part of the brain where they're spending more time up there until anywhere between the ages of 5 and 7. The analytical part of the brain allows us then, like as adults, when a situation comes up and we feel triggered, to have that internal dialogue, to talk about, well, okay, that happened and that was scary, but I'm safe. I don't need to worry about it. Our little ones don't have that capability yet, and that's key in understanding the responses that we're seeing from them in different environments. So why is this brain overview important to know? Well, it's because most of the problems that we see at daycare, things like biting, hitting, pushing, or eloping, which is running away, are often an indicator of that fight, flight, or freeze response. The basic needs that our children have are to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel loved. So it really comes down to safety first always and connection. It's essential that in outside environments that our kids have to have one person in there that they truly see as a safe haven in the storm, somebody that they truly feel connected with. And I know a lot of daycare providers and teachers are going to say, I do my best to connect with my kids. The hard part is that some kids are just going to need it more, or they're going to need it in a way that's different than maybe the other kids do. So there's an old adage that says, the child who's acting out the most is the one who needs the most love, or I would say connection or safety. As I move into talking about strategies to support kids in other environments, I want to break it down into some strategies that you can do as a parent because it's really hard. They're not in your care at the time that these things are happening. And I also want to share some strategies for daycare providers and educators so that they have some tools for their toolbox to help with these challenging situations. Let's start with some strategies for you as a parent. So one of my favorite things to have parents do who are struggling in other environments is to have them fill out an About Me sheet for their child that kind of outlines what their strengths are, what areas they need support, what their triggers are. Having this information to pass on to the daycare provider can be really, really helpful so that they're already anticipating and maybe have some tools and strategies in their toolbox. And if that sounds like something that you think would be helpful, I have one that's already created for you. If you'd like to give it a go, I have a link for it down in the description. Another tip to help the care provider or the teacher is to make sure that you're being clear with them about what behaviors you're seeing at home. Perhaps you saw some of these behaviors at home earlier on and you've used some strategies and they've been diminished and you haven't seen them in months. Then you want to let them know what was going on then and what strategies you found helpful so that maybe the teacher can then try the same thing in the classroom or in the daycare setting. Another thing that I think can be helpful that a lot of parents don't ask about is to go in and do an observation of your child in the daycare or in the educational environment. Look, nobody knows your child better than you. If you can go in and do an observation and see what's going on and the triggers and watch your child's body language, you may be able to provide important insights to that teacher or that care provider. Because let's be honest, they get a lot of kids there. They might be missing something. And this next one is kind of a hard one. And I know some of the daycare providers and teachers may not be happy with me saying this, but if the behavior is only happening at the daycare center or the school, then they're going to have to be the ones that do the work to try to eliminate it. Strategies and consequences need to occur within the environment where the behavior is occurring. It would be like taking my dog up to my mom's place and them chewing up the couch cushions, and then she brings them home and I start yelling at them. My dogs are going to be like, I don't know why you're yelling at me. They're not going to be able to make that correlation between what they did up there and what is going on at home. And it's the same as a parent. It's going to be hard for you to institute consequences or things like that at home when the behavior isn't happening there. So if your daycare provider or your child's teacher is telling you that you need to do the work at home, then politely let them know that the behavior is not happening there and that the logical place for the intervention to happen is going to be in their environment. And then let them know that you'll support them in any way you can during this process and that you want to work together as a team to try to help your child move beyond this stage. Now, one strategy that you can try at home that the daycare provider or teacher can do as well is to try, depending on the age of your child, to use a social story. You can find social stories for pretty much anything on Teachers Pay Teachers or Pinterest. So a social story is a short little book that you make that outlines a situation and a way to resolve that situation. The idea is to familiarize your child with this process, have them identify with maybe what's going on with the character. The stories are very, very short and very, very simple and outline some things that they can do in the future to respond to situations that maybe were upsetting to them. So you can try creating that book and doing it at home. The teacher might want to incorporate that into maybe story time or some one-on-one time with that child, going over the social story book so that it's getting reinforced, the messaging in both environments. Another tip for both parents and teachers is that you can act out that social story during play. Play is a huge and important part of children's ability to develop emotional regulation by practicing skills and words and actions during play. It's safe and it allows them to express their emotions with no judgment. Let me share an example. I remember when my daughter was like 3.5. She came home from preschool and she was upstairs playing with her Barbies, and the things she was saying while she was playing with her Barbies, very aggressive. I was concerned, like, what is going on here? Well, come to find out, she was mad with some friends who'd made her feel left out at school. So she was acting out with her Barbies, having control in a social environment. She was able to take what happened in school and then practice the skill of asserting herself and having control in play. So acting out social stories or the triggers and the responses during play can be a really effective way to help your little one work through those emotions and get closer to that emotional regulation, eliminating the behavior. Okay, so let's talk about some specific strategies for daycare providers and educators. The first thing that should happen when there's some kind of incident that is dangerous, like aggression or eloping, that you should do is do the ABC process. And that's where we're looking at the antecedent, what was the trigger, the resulting behavior, and then what was the result of that behavior or the consequence. Behavior is always communication. What was the child trying to communicate? From there, you can then create a plan of action. While it's tempting, we don't want to assume that this is going to be a one-time occurrence. We always want to be prepared so that we can help keep other kids safe as well as help little ones who may be struggling. Once that plan is created, the next step is to be vigilant, and that means you want to be prepared rather than being surprised when and if that behavior happens again. So once you've kind of created a plan of action, you're going to want to stay really close to that child during situations where the triggers are high and which are usually the more unstructured parts of the daily routine. You want to watch closely and stay near the little one, not hovering, but close enough, I would say within arm's reach, that if you did need to intervene, you could. So let me share an example of a situation that I encountered a while back with a little one who was about 2.5, who was at a daycare environment and was doing a lot of biting. The daycare was overwhelmed with it, and he was being threatened to be kicked out. So I went in and did an observation, and upon questioning the staff, they really hadn't done the first part, the ABC. They really hadn't put together and tried to figure out specifically where they were seeing this, or if it was one particular child that was being targeted. As I was watching, I could see that the staff were busy over preparing breakfast for the kids, and there was free play, and the kids were just kind of off on their own doing their own thing. And the little student that I was working with was at a table playing with some toys, and another friend came over and was leaning across the table, not trying to take my friend's toys, but leaning across the table very close to him and in his personal space. And I immediately saw a change in the little one's body language. He started to kind of scoop in, his body turned in, he had a scowl on his face, and I knew right then and there, this was the trigger. That little friend was inside his personal bubble. And we have to recognize as daycare providers and educators, as well as parents, that everybody has a different personal bubble size. Some people have really big bubbles and some kids have really little ones. And I find that those kids that are really sensitive with that smaller bubble, those tend to be our biters. Somebody comes in and boom, I gotcha. So when I saw this happen, I was able to get in and start coaching the little ones involved in that scenario to try to prevent a bite from happening. So that takes me on to the next tip, which is to coach and model in those situations. The goal is to help our little friend who's struggling to be able to communicate in a different way outside of using aggression or eloping. And we also want to help the other kids who are involved, who might have been the victim of a bite, to understand how those two things work together. So in the situation that I was just sharing, when I saw my little friend pull everything in, I got down on his level and I said, "Oh, is Joey too close to you? And he was, And I said, let's tell Joey, move, you're too close. And so he was like, move. Then we worked with Joey to let him know, Joey, you are too close to Jimmy. You're in his space and he doesn't like it. Can you move out of the way? And he was like, oh, okay. He had no clue. And so he moved out of the way. So you want to continue to do that kind of coaching and modeling in those scenarios, whether it's daycare, preschool, or even going to the library and playing in the free play area at the library. We really need to closely watch the body language that's being communicated for our little ones and use those opportunities to teach. And now a proactive strategy that I encourage all daycare providers and educators to do with those little ones who are struggling is connection time. And I know you're very, very busy, but by front loading and providing lots of connection, you're helping that child to feel safer and more attached to you, which can significantly decrease their need to act out those behaviors because they have a safe person in the room that they know is going to support and help them when they get stuck, or that they can go to when they need help. And some kids need that connection right off the bat, the minute they walk in the room. It's really hard for them transitioning from home to school or home to daycare. Then what you're going to want to do is find some way that you can provide some connection immediately. And I get it. Everybody's coming in. It's chaos when everybody's arriving at school or at daycare. But maybe that little friend gets to be your special helper. So they get to help with setting up breakfast, or they get to help by picking out the books or setting up centers. Get them actively involved as your special helper so that they've got that connection time with you, and it gives you an opportunity to really strengthen that bond with them, allowing them to feel safe and secure. And obviously, as a care provider or teacher, you want to make sure that you're keeping parents in the loop so that they can reinforce any things that you're finding at home, that you can share success stories so parents can reinforce and praise their child and let them know what a great job they did at home, so that you guys are all working together as a team for the benefit of the child. So the big thing really is connection, safety, and watch closely. Another important consideration when looking at behaviors in outside environments is what's going on in that environment. Remember, young kids can only process about 5 to 10 pieces of information at a time. Their sensory systems haven't learned to tune out all of the different visual things hanging on the wall and the things spinning over there and the sound of the radio. So if you have a little one that's struggling in those environments, you might want to think about what's going on there, and are there any things that I can reduce from a sensory standpoint to make it easier for them to be successful in this environment. So in summary, challenging behaviors outside the home are hard for everybody, but especially the child. And keeping in mind always that behavior is communication. So it's important to put those investigative goggles on and try to get to the root cause of what's going on behind that behavior. If you take the time to identify the trigger, provide more connection, reduce sensory overload, and implement strategies consistently for learning as a team with a parent, the teacher, the daycare provider, your little one will pass through this phase like a pro. I hope you found this information helpful, and if you did, please consider sharing it with somebody else who might benefit from watching it, or give me a like and subscribe. It helps me get my information out in front of other parents who are struggling and looking for resources. That's it for this week. Until next time.